Hello, and welcome to today's advanced English listening practice. For the next 15 minutes, listen carefully to a story written for English learners. Focus on understanding the main ideas, details, and vocabulary from context. Try not to translate every word. Instead, focus on understanding the overall meaning. Let's begin. Part 1. The train ride that changed everything. Emma had been taking the same train to work for nearly 5 years. Every weekday morning, she boarded at exactly 7:12 a.m., sat in the same carriage, and usually chose the same seat near the window. The journey lasted 40 minutes. During that time, she typically listened to music, checked emails, or stared out the window while thinking about everything she needed to accomplish that day. The routine was predictable. In fact, it had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. Most of the passengers seemed similar. They boarded the train, found a seat, avoided eye contact, and disappeared into their phones until they reached their destination. Emma worked as an administrative assistant for a large company in the city center. The job was stable, the salary was reasonable, and her coworkers were friendly. Yet lately, she had begun to feel restless. Nothing was wrong, exactly. She simply had the feeling that life was passing by more quickly than she expected. At 32 years old, she had imagined her life would look different. Years earlier, she had dreamed of traveling extensively, learning new languages, and living abroad. Instead, she found herself following the same schedule every day. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. One rainy Tuesday morning, everything changed. The train was unusually crowded. Emma walked through several carriages before finding an empty seat. The only available place was beside an elderly man reading a thick book. As she sat down, the train suddenly lurched forward. The man's book slipped from his hands and landed on the floor. "I'm sorry," Emma said as she quickly picked it up. The man smiled. "No harm done," he replied. When she handed the book back, she noticed the cover was filled with stamps and handwritten notes. It looked old and well-traveled. "That's an interesting book," she said politely. The man's smile widened. "It has been to 27 countries with me." Emma laughed, assuming he was joking. But he wasn't. For the next few minutes, he told her about places he had visited over the years. He described walking through markets in Morocco, riding trains across Europe, and watching the sunrise over mountains in South America. The stories were vivid and detailed. By the time the train reached the next station, Emma realized she was listening more carefully than she had listened to anything in months. For the first time in a long while, she felt genuinely curious. "How did you manage to travel so much?" she asked. The man chuckled softly. "One trip at a time." Emma smiled. "That sounds simple." "It is simple," he said. "Simple doesn't always mean easy." The man introduced himself as Robert. For the remainder of the journey, they talked about travel, work, and life. When the train finally arrived downtown, Emma was surprised to discover that 40 minutes had passed. The journey had felt shorter than usual. As they stood to leave, Robert handed her a small piece of paper. On it was written a single sentence. "Do one thing this month that your future self will thank you for." Emma looked up. "What does this mean?" Robert smiled. "It means that life changes when we stop waiting for the perfect moment." Before she could ask another question, the crowd carried him toward the station exit. Within seconds, he had disappeared. Emma folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. She assumed she would never see him again, but over the next several days, she couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. "Do one thing this month that your future self will thank you for." The sentence seemed simple, yet the more she thought about it, the more powerful it became. She began noticing how often she postponed things. She postponed learning Spanish. She postponed taking trips. She postponed joining clubs and meeting new people. She postponed almost everything she truly wanted to do. Without realizing it, she had spent years waiting for a future version of herself to start living. One evening, after work, Emma sat at her kitchen table and made a list. At the top of the page, she wrote, "What would I regret not doing 5 years from now?" The answer appeared almost immediately. Travel. She had always wanted to visit another country alone, not with family, not with friends, by herself. The idea excited her. It also terrified her, and that was exactly why she couldn't stop thinking about it. Part 2. The first step. For the next few weeks, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the list she had written. Every time she opened her notebook, the same word stared back at her. Travel. The idea seemed exciting in theory. In reality, it felt intimidating. She had never traveled alone before. Questions immediately filled her mind. What if something went wrong? What if she got lost? What if she felt lonely? What if she spent a lot of money and didn't enjoy the experience? The more she thought about it, the more reasons she found not to go. Yet something had changed. For the first time in years, she recognized that fear was making many of her decisions. She wasn't avoiding travel because she didn't want to do it. She was avoiding it because it felt uncomfortable. One Saturday morning, Emma opened her laptop and began researching destinations. She considered dozens of cities. Some were too expensive, others seemed too far away. Eventually, she chose Lisbon, Portugal. The city looked beautiful, welcoming, and easy to explore. The moment she booked the ticket, a mixture of excitement and panic washed over her. There was no turning back now. Over the following months, she prepared carefully. She watched travel videos. She learned a few Portuguese phrases. She read guides written by other solo travelers. The trip slowly transformed from a dream into a real plan. As the departure date approached, her nerves increased. The night before her flight, she barely slept. Part of her wondered whether she should cancel everything. After all, staying home would be easier. It would be safer. It would be familiar. But the next morning, she forced herself to leave for the airport. Several hours later, she found herself standing in a completely different country. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The signs looked unfamiliar. The streets were different. Even simple tasks seemed slightly more complicated than they were at home. For a moment, Emma may questioned whether she had made a mistake. Then something unexpected happened. A local cafe owner noticed that she seemed confused while trying to find a nearby attraction. Instead of ignoring her, he spent several minutes helping her understand the map, but his kindness immediately made the city feel less intimidating. Over the next few days, similar moments continued to occur. She met travelers from different countries. She spoke with locals. She tried foods she had never tasted before. Some experiences were wonderful, others were awkward. She got lost more than once. She accidentally boarded the wrong bus. She mispronounced words and occasionally embarrassed herself. Yet every challenge became a story. Every mistake became a memory. The confidence she gained surprised her. She realized that she was far more capable than she had assumed. The person who had been afraid to travel alone was gradually disappearing. In her place was someone more curious, adaptable, and adventurous. One afternoon, while sitting near a waterfront plaza, Emma pulled out her notebook. She turned to the page where she had written her question. What would I regret not doing 5 years from now? Beneath the word travel, she added another sentence. Most fears become smaller once you face them. For the first time in years, she felt as though her life was expanding rather than repeating itself. She didn't know exactly what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She no longer wanted to spend her life waiting. Part 3. A Different Future. When Emma returned home, her friends immediately noticed a difference. She looked more confident, more energetic, more engaged with life. Many people assumed the trip itself had changed her. In reality, it was the decision to go. The journey had been wonderful, but the biggest transformation happened the moment she stopped letting fear make her choices. Back at work, her daily routine remained largely the same. She still took the train. She still worked in the same office. She still lived in the same apartment. Yet everything felt slightly different. The world seemed larger. The future seemed more open. A few weeks later, Emma was once again riding the morning train when she noticed a familiar face. Several rows ahead sat Robert, the elderly traveler who had given her the note. Emma immediately stood up and walked toward him. Robert, he looked up from his book and smiled. Emma, you remember me? Of course, he said. Did you do something your future self would thank you for? Emma laughed. I went to Portugal. Robert closed his book. And how was it? It was amazing, she said. It was also difficult and uncomfortable and occasionally stressful. Robert nodded. Those are often signs that we're growing. For the remainder of the journey, Emma shared stories from her trip. She talked about the people she had met, the mistakes she had made, and the confidence she had gained. When she finished, Robert listened quietly for a moment. Then he asked a simple question. What's next? Emma paused. A year earlier, she wouldn't have had an answer. Now she did. She wanted to continue learning Spanish. She wanted to visit more countries. She wanted to say yes to opportunities instead of automatically rejecting them. Most importantly, she wanted to remain curious. Robert smiled. Good. What? Most people think courage is something you're born with, he said, but courage is usually built one decision at a time. As the train approached their station, Emma realized she would probably remember that sentence for the rest of her life. When the doors opened, both stood and prepared to leave. Before stepping onto the platform, Robert turned toward her. One last piece of advice. Emma waited. Don't make the mistake of thinking that growth only comes from big adventures. What do you mean? The same courage that takes you across an ocean can also help you start a conversation, learn a new skill, help a stranger, or try something you've been avoiding. Emma nodded thoughtfully. The lesson made perfect sense. Life wasn't transformed by one extraordinary moment, it was shaped by countless ordinary decisions. As Robert disappeared into the crowd once again, Emma felt grateful, not because he had changed her life, but because he had reminded her that she could change it herself. Years later, Emma would travel to many new places. She would meet remarkable people and collect unforgettable memories. Yet when friends asked her how everything started, she always thought back to that rainy morning on the train. A crowded carriage, a dropped book, a conversation with a stranger, and a simple sentence written on a small piece of paper. Do one thing this month that your future self will thank you for. The message had seemed insignificant at the time, but sometimes the smallest ideas create the biggest changes. Thank you for listening. Now let's check your understanding with a few comprehension questions. 1. Why did Emma hesitate to book her trip? 2. Which city did she choose to visit? 3. What helped her feel more comfortable after arriving? 4. What lesson did she learn from traveling alone? 5. How did her friends react when she returned home? 6. Where did she meet Robert again? 7. According to Robert, how was courage developed? 8. What did Emma decide she wanted to do next? 9. What was Robert's final piece of advice? 10. What is the main lesson of the story? Post your answers in the comments below. We'll see you next time.